Y'all know Cameron Smith, my buddy, your buddy as well. When he's not guest hosting on WTN, he is a proud member of the Tennessean editorial board. Cameron, always great to have you on. I am shocked, Cameron, that we have to have this conversation because I remember talking about the state of our foster system years ago. And you've come out with yet another article that talks about how our state is still not compliant when it comes to our foster system via federal standards. And I'm going to let you fill in the blanks here. But the headline, Cameron, is that we still have hundreds of foster kids still sleeping in state offices. Talk about what's going on.
Yeah, Dan, I hate that I'm having to have this conversation again with folks in Tennessee. We actually saw a news article over at the Tennessean about, once again, foster kids sleeping in state office buildings. And this is an issue near and dear to my heart because one of my sons was one of those kids in one of those state office buildings. And for the volunteer state, if you are pro-life and limited government, the worst thing that could happen is for the state to parent kids. And so this to me is an issue for the whole volunteer state to say, hey, we've got to step up and say, hey, we're pro-life. We want these kids to have a chance because most of them are in the system through no fault of their own. And we're going to do the hard thing, bring them into our homes, care for them so we can raise them up and teach them and help them be contributing members to Tennessee's culture and community as opposed to being on a path for things like prison or, maybe not even making it in some cases. And we got to sound the alarm again.
Cameron, so I was reading your piece in the Tennessean, and part of what you're doing is, and you just did it in the last 30 seconds, you're imploring conservatives as the pro-family party to live up to that standard, to live up to that moniker and take some of these kids in. Talk a little bit about who these kids are. And you have walked the walk. I mean, how many kids have you fostered now? It's a lot, if I'm not mistaken.
We've had 3 long-term placements. We've done a lot of respite care. We have 2 in our house right now. And I'll tell anybody considering this, what we do is called therapeutic foster care through youth villages. And these are kids with a lot of trauma, a lot of things that have not gone their way. And it is really a challenge to parent them sometimes. However, there's a lot of different kinds of fostering that need to be done. Some with babies, some with kids that it's traumatic anytime you're separated from your parents, but some cases are a little better, if you can say that, than others. And so the goal for the state is reunification. If there's possibly a way to bring families back together, the state wants to do that, but we need people that are willing to facilitate that, shoulder the work. And it is truly a righteous cause, something that I think we should take on. And we've just hoped it would get better. And while Commissioner Quinn and DCS have done some things to move the ball, the truth is they don't have too many lobbyists for detached kids in Tennessee. It's not a cause that makes a lot of money. In fact, if anything, it's an expenditure for the state that's significant. And so, again, conservatives need to look at this and say, how can we possibly help families shoulder this load? The church around these families needs to say, how can we support these families so it's not the state having to do everything? Because honestly, the state government, whether it's in a red state or a blue state, is not meant to be anybody's parent.
I got to ask, Cameron, and message received that if folks can help, if you've got an extra bedroom, if you are able to shoulder some of this, then please do so. But I guess part of my question is, so we are a state with a surplus, and we are a state with, I would think, and people are going to scoff at my next statement, I may live to regret it, but by and large, I mean, we are basically speaking a pretty good government, pretty good state government.
Sure.
What is happening? Like, I don't, when I got your text over the weekend, I was so frustrated because, again, not to belabor the point, but we've been covering this for years. Where is the state falling down on this?
A couple things. One, it's not able to get the right people into the pipeline because these are tough jobs. Being a caseworker for DCS, one of my sons has had 7 different caseworkers in the course of 1 year. So you want to talk about instability, that's part of it, because these jobs, truthfully, do not pay what the work demands, because you are dealing with the darkness, you're dealing with kids who are traumatized, and it takes a toll. So we need to really look at, hey, are we paying people well to do the job that we need them to do? The second thing is we haven't even really asked. The DCS has failed so miserably to have a advertising campaign to say, hey, look, we got these kids, we need your help. When's the last time you saw a DCS ad out there asking you or anybody else to open their doors and be a part? And if they can't do that, to support foster families. It just doesn't happen. It hasn't happened, and that's a major, major failure. And finally, you need people who have been foster parents, who are adoptive parents, who have been and encountered the system to run the system. Right now, we don't have that. We do not. We have bureaucrats, and we have some really nice people, but not people who have experienced this straight up. The governor needs to change that, because until we have people that know what's wrong with the system because they've experienced it, we're not going to get the results we need, because the sense of urgency will never be there.
Have you, you're an esteemed member of the Tennessean editorial board. I'm not being snarky on that. I mean, people know who you are. Have you tried to get some FaceTime with the governor and Cameron Sexton, Jack Johnson? Have you tried to move the football down the field?
Yes, and that's something that I've engaged. I actually sent the same article that I wrote to the governor's chief of staff, and he's a good friend of mine, and said, hey, we got to do something here. Here's the problem. I don't want the government to solve the problem. The government is the problem. That should be a mantra for conservatives. We need the private sector. We need businesses. You want to talk about logistics? That's a huge problem plaguing the thousands of kids in the system. You know what? We run some pretty good logistics out of Memphis in a company called FedEx. I wonder if they could spare somebody to help us figure out, hey, how do we make sure we don't lose track of any of these kids? There's a lot of ways that we can come together and solve this. I don't know that the government needs to be the principal driver here. We need, frankly, the church. I'll give a shout out to Church of the City. They're building a whole facility called The Village to support foster families. That's the kind of solution we need here. And as conservatives, we need to back that with everything we've got, because asking the government to help or to be better parents for kids that don't have that, that's just principally not what we need to do, even if we improve in that arena.
So, Cameron, a couple of things is that, because I want you to be able to convince folks that they need to help these foster kids. If I'm listening to this, which I am, obviously, tell me the satisfaction you get from helping these kids.
Yeah, and the first thing I'll say, Dan, is I actually had this conversation posed to me by a group of bankers I was talking with. And they said, well, we would just be real worried about the safety of our children, with these kids with trauma and that sort of thing. How can you ensure that your home is safe? And I said, well, we do the best we can. Anytime a new son comes into our house, we say, you keep this place safe, we keep you safe. That's how our pack works. But I said, safety is not my highest order virtue. The highest order virtue is for the young men in my care to be resilient individuals who can be leaders in their communities, leaders in their families, and leaders in the institutions that are failing us right now. And in order to do that, you got to be resilient. You got to do hard things. Taking in some of these kids with some of this trauma is a real hard thing. But if you want to set a real example for your children to change the world, to matter to someone, and not just, hovel in their own certainty, then fostering is for you, because they will learn. My sons understand what it means to be loved and supported by parents, because they've seen sons come into our care who haven't had that. And man, they can tell you the difference real quick right now. And they're all bought in. Anytime we bring somebody new into our home, our whole family sits down and we vote. And if the vote's not unanimous, we don't do it. And I can tell you that my sons have grown exponentially because they've seen what empathy looks like. It's not saying, man, I wish you well, I hope it goes great for you. It's getting down in the dirt and the dust with folks who have had a rough run and saying, I'm here with you. And man, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Cameron, I'm hearing you speak, and I know that there is, and I don't want to sound insensitive, there are more commercials for people to go rent dogs than there are to try to help kids.
Yeah. And if you need an emotional support animal, then you really should consider fostering, because you're not as resilient as you need to be. And our culture, one of the problems with our culture is we don't do the right thing in real life, but man, we are virtue signaling warriors on social media. And I would encourage everybody who wants to be a serious human that if you say you care about life, if you say you want to limit the reach of government, then why don't you show a kid what it's like to take care of them, to help them order their emotions, sort it out, and grow. Because I can promise you that, like, it'll be tough, it'll be hard, but that's a real reward. It's not like a like on Facebook. It's way better.
Yeah. You know what, Cameron, I love what you're saying. How can people, if somebody's listening to you right now and they're interested in trying to not adopt a pet, but, try to help foster a child, and just so people know, and I know I said rent a dog and I apologize. How does one get started in this process? And just so folks know, fostering is different than adopting, right? Fostering is you are temporarily watching or caring for and housing a child until they either, the details and the issues are worked out at their home, or they can find someone to permanently take a child, correct?
Yeah. There's fostering, foster to adopt. There's straight up adoption. What I tell everybody is go do the training. You can go to the article I wrote, Cameron Smith, Tennessee Inn. You can find it. The information's at the bottom. Do the training. There's no obligation to foster to do the training. I promise you the training will make you a better parent. You'll understand the science behind trauma. You'll understand how to cool things off before having discussions. Do that with youth villages. Do it with DCS. And then as a family, make a decision and see what you want to do. All my contact information's out there. If you're not sure about it, reach out to me and I will absolutely let you know kind of what it's like, talk to you, because it's not just a thing I'm writing about and talking about. This is the way we live our lives.
Cameron, great conversation, and give your email address. And is there like a website that folks can get more information with all this?
Yeah, the websites for DCS and youth villages are at the bottom of that column. At D as in David, Cameron Smith on X is the best way to get a hold of me, and I'll make sure you have all the resources you need.
All right, Cameron, thank you very much, and I loved your article. So we'll continue to monitor the progress, and I hope that we do see some progress. 8:20 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.